Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle White, Senior Curator at the Menil Collection. First, thank you so much to our friends at DeCamera. The music you were just listening to was a live recording by pianist Andrew Dial, performing sections of Zodiac Suite by Mary Lou Williams. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is our first In Dialogue program. It's the Menil's new series of live online conversations about our collection, our exhibitions, and the ideas shaping contemporary discourses about art. I'm thrilled to be kicking off the program tonight with my friend and Houston-based artist, Jamal Cyrus. He will be joining us from his studio just around the corner here from the Menil Collection. Hi, Jamal.
Hi, Michelle.
Before we get started, Jamal and I are really excited to answer your questions, and we'll be taking them throughout our conversation. So you can submit these anytime by emailing programs@menil.org. So we will be seeing them, so please send them in. Before we get started too, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of our Menil members. We are so grateful for your support. I'd also like to thank Marlene Marker, who I hope is in the audience right now. You made this tonight's program possible with your generous support of the work to the collection that we will be discussing. And I also wanted to thank Carrie Inman for all you do to make programs like this possible. Okay, so welcome, Jamal. Again, we are so close, but it seems like so far away during this time. How are you and your family doing?
We're doing all right. We're making it through. Today, I found out from HISD that they won't be starting school until, well, they'll be starting school virtually for a month, and then school may in person begin in early October. So that's one of the kind of, things that was really over my head, just wondering what they were going to do about the upcoming school year. So
stressful.
Right about today, I know.
I feel you. That news coming in today was stressful. But so Jamal, we already have a question in from Veronica S. And this pertains to life in quarantine and being alone. She wanted to know what you're listening to in your studio these days.
I go between a record player and my phone. But something that I've been listening to a lot lately is this album. I think that was maybe released a year or two ago by Prince, called Piano on the Microphone. Particularly this cut called International Lover, which I don't know if people are familiar with this, but it's a really amazing version of this song. I would definitely suggest checking it out.
Cool. Well, and hey, before we start, congratulations. So I want everyone to know that Jamal is the recipient of the 2020 David Driscoll Prize, which is facilitated through the High Museum in Atlanta. And this is such a prestigious honor. This is an award given yearly to an artist, art historian, curator who's advanced significantly the field of African-American art. And other recipients have included Dr. Kelly Jones, Franklin Sermons, Naima Keith, Mark Bradford. So huge congrats on that recognition.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I just wanted, before we start, for those of you that may not be familiar with Jamal's work, a very quick biography. Jamal's probably best known, I would say, for your research, a kind of driven practice. And I think you've described it really beautifully as exploring the gaps in historical knowledge. And it really, over a decade ago, I think it was when you really started in your work tracing trajectories of Black political movements in the United States. And what's been fascinating to watch your career evolve is how that's then moved into sort of more global kind of glimpses into the African diaspora, which you've been really invested in the past few years. Jamal received his BFA from the University of Houston and his MFA from the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied with the great artist Terry Atkins. His work is found in many collections in the United States, and he's been a part of many international exhibitions and biennials. Really exciting news here in Houston. You will be the subject of a major survey exhibition at the Blaffer later this year. And I think no bio, Jamal, is complete without mentioning you're a founding member of the artist collective Otabinga Jones and Associates. And that's, in fact, how we first started working together.
That is, yeah.
I think it was 13 years ago, Jamal.
Yeah,
We organized a show here with Franklin Sermon.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it actually was a year before that, though. Did the show open in 2007?
2007, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think so. 2006 or so, we started, working together.
And we'll definitely talk about that project a little later in tonight's conversation. So Jamal and I really wanted to focus this conversation around a new work to the Menil and a recent work by Jamal. And as means of introduction, I'm going to play a short video for you to orientate you with this work. So if we can get that going. So as Houstonians in the audience know, the Menil is closed right now because of the pandemic. The foyer, however, and here we are on the north side, is visible to the audience. And in light of the important conversations that are happening about the Black Lives Matter movement, we wanted to install a few works that could be seen from the exterior, works that are engaged with these crucial dialogues, and dialogues that are very much being led by artists like Jamal. Those are the dialogues we want to follow. As you can see, it consists of two found objects. It's a plaster bust of the civil rights leader Martin Luther King, and it sits on an industrial triple beam balance scale, and that is a scale known for its precision. So Jamal, we're so thrilled to have it up. It is one of those moments in the museum that's difficult for all of us, but to be able to showcase this work for our audience from the outside has really been exciting.
I really also really like the pairings that you made with that piece too. I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you. And so the title of the work, if we can throw that back on the screen, the title is called Misconstrued Rap Lyric #1. And I thought that would be a good way in to talk about how you approach the title of this work.
Yeah, so usually actually when I do title something, I'm often trying to play with language in some way, or trying to maybe highlight an aspect of the work which is invisible, like it commemorates something or a person or an event. But this particular one, the particular title of this one, refers to the way that it was created. So I've been holding on to this idea for a while. Back in 2010, I was spending some time in Washington, D.C., and I was staying in the male dormitory on the campus of Howard University. And one evening, I thought I heard, because music would be often playing, like, and you can hear from room to room. I thought I heard the verse, I'm like Martin Luther King on the triple beam. And when I heard that, it was shocking because one, a triple beam, as you stated, is known for its precision, but a triple beam is also known for its use in rap terminology as being what you weigh cocaine on, right? And so, at the time there was all this kind of drug rap being produced, and just for somebody to sneak his name into one of, what would be a typical reference to me was revolutionary And it was just such a strong image, you know, that it called up in my mind, like that, that, yeah, I said, like, immediately I knew I had to try to make that visual.
So what is the actual lyric?
I don't know what the actual lyric is. I mean, I still, so even before we talked the other day, I'm still like Googling it to see if anybody has ever said that, but nothing is coming up after 10 years. So I am assuming like it's something maybe that I wanted to hear, or something that's kind of like bubbling up from my subconscious. But yeah.
I mean, and that's also, I think, what's so important about this work is that it really is about memory, right? And not only your memory, but historical memory.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, when I first heard it, like that was the main thing that I was most focused on, like manifesting, you know, like trying to create this line of poetry that I thought I heard. And so, you know, after years, you know, things fell into place. You know, the triple beam was found in a resale shop here somewhere in Houston. The bust of MLK, um, I bought on eBay. It's originally from somewhere in Mexico. It's stated on the bottom. I don't know if you saw that one either. But yeah, eventually things fit together, and the piece came out. And when we presented the piece, one of the interesting things was, honestly, um, I was not thinking about the meaning of this particular work as much as for me what the work was doing, right? Kind of taking this, well, not kind of, like taking this very important figure within American history, and as well as what you would probably say is a sacred figure, right? Um, and you know, bringing it into everyday parlance, and like into a new kind of art form as well. You know, being hip hop music at the time, and so you know, it was working for me. And once we displayed it, that's when, you know, more starts to come out about what these two seemingly disparate objects, what happens when you put them together, you know. And so we did a walkthrough at the gallery, and it was a nice walkthrough, kind of in the intergenerational kind of group of people. And one of the older ladies talked about this idea of legacy, right? And you know, MLK having this legacy that is so weighty and like so like overwhelming. And then another younger woman in the group also took this take on thinking about MLK in reference to a drug, right? And thinking that, or stating that his persona, and perhaps you can even say civil rights in general, was kind of, you know, perhaps, you know, from her perspective, used in a way that was numbing, or a way that was that basically drugged or slowed down the movement of generations that came after, right? So I think, you know, her idea is MLK was used to control, you know, later generations of Black youth and Black activists, right? So, you know, for me, that was very shocking, because I hadn't thought of it in that way, but definitely I have thought of the civil rights movement, you know, playing that role amongst young Black Americans.
I think this is what's really powerful about this work is you're taking this simple gesture of taking these two disparate objects and bringing them together. And forgive me, because we're here in the Menil Collection and surrealism kind of affects how we see the world, but I can't help but think through this juxtaposition, were you thinking through tenets of historical surrealism at all when you were approaching this?
Well, surrealism, I've as we'll talk about in a little bit later in the talk, like um, I've spent a lot of time at the Menil Collection. I've spent a lot of time in that museum since I was a high school student, right? So so that's roughly like 29 years ago, right? And so I do think surrealism is kind of encoded in my understanding of art making. Kind of one of the ways that I choose to express myself is through those kind of like like maybe fantastic kind of directions. One of the interesting things too is that MLK also the use of MLK, his image and whatever sculptures that can be found of him is also often used in Black folk art. So there is which people who are familiar with my work know that I also am very inspired by, and so both of those kind of things were happening with that piece.
And let's go back to the work, because you're mentioning the bust, and something that's really striking about this work when you see it in person is that this is not a pristine object.
No.
There's sort of losses, and our conservators to do a condition report on this. Like this is a handled work, and how do you kind of understand the importance of kind of the wear of this object to the work?
Yeah, with this one, it's interesting because you don't know if it's somebody who's handled it because of how important it is to them, or you don't know if it has this kind of patina because somebody put it outside and no longer needed it. It has those kind of double readings. But I will say that I am often attracted by works that do have this kind of have a patina, which to me kind of communicates care and time spent with it. And this is also kind of a thing that I picked up, kind of viewing works at the Menil as well. I think we have a picture in the PowerPoint of a pre-Dogon sculpture. Right. So this idea about accumulation, I'm really handling, and accumulation is something that I really kind of prize in my approach to art making. Some people are interested in like a quick kind of effortless kind of work, but I'm more interested in things that I have to spend time with. And I think this has something to do with like wanting to kind of dialogue with a work, or wanting a work or material to also kind of guide me through the process of handling it and making something out of it.
And I just wanted to point out, Jamal, I think this is a particularly powerful example from the Menil's collection of a West African object that has this particular patina, right? That's like built up with organic materials. So you get this very kind of the sort of objectness of this work is really profound, with this idea of handling and touch and kind of materials clinging to the surface.
Yeah, and it starts to deform the sculpture, right? It starts to take on its own life in a really gentle and beautiful way. And so, that's the kind of stuff that I seek to I seek to create. Well, yeah.
But do you think, Jamal, too, knowing the impact the artist Terry Atkinson has had to your work, and this idea of the accumulation of time, like is this also part of how you deal with materials?
That is something that I think he helped me to understand, and to be able to pinpoint, and to be able to start to yeah, again, to understand like what this communicates to the viewer, what this kind of does for the artists themselves in terms of making the work. With his particular approach to that, it was a concept that he had, which was oh gosh, it's the term includes the word disclosure in it, right? And basically, for him, um, he also wanted a work to kind of tell him what it was going to be, but it didn't have to be through the handling of it. It had to be through him spending time with it in his studio, looking at it repeatedly. Um, yeah. So that was his particular thing. I don't think he cared too much about spending a lot of time with pieces. It, it actually like that was one of the things that he warned me against. Like when I started studying with him, like and he would talk about, interesting things like basically said like, your people have labored too much. Like why do you want to, why do you want to carry that on, right? Like the people, yeah. So, but for me, it's different. When I came to graduate school and I started working with him, I wanted to be able to create works that allowed me to sit with him longer, right? Like I was moving from a very digital world. My undergrad was in photography, right, to sculpture in graduate school, and so I needed to be able to to take the time and be patient with the work and to push myself in that regard. And so I think I figured out different ways of kind of doing that since then.
And it makes me think of here's like even a more recent sculpture, right?
Yeah.
That deals with this idea, like as you've been talking, and I think you've used this word before, this idea of the charged object. And that certainly comes across in something like this piece from 2020, so one of your most recent works.
Yeah. So this work actually came out of another work that I was trying to make in the studio at that time. So the original work was this a group of encyclopedias that was created by Johnson Publishing, and they were all to be encased in leather, right? And I'm still making that sculpture, but in the process of trying to do it, like I also had other things kind of going around in the studio, and one of them was this. I had just recently gone to Galveston and got basically about a trash bag full of this material, which is called Sargassum. And Sargassum is a kind of seaweed that comes from a very highly salinated part of the Atlantic Ocean. It's from what people have kind of said and kind of it's in the middle of the triangular trade route, and it washes onto the beaches in the Caribbean, and it also washes onto the beach of Galveston Island. So it has this really interesting history in regards to its geography, right? One of the other interesting things about it is it comes out green, dries, after a few days, whatever, has a middle color of kind of reddish purple, and then toward the end goes kind of dark brown, kind of black.
Okay.
And it also, once it's fully dried, it starts to look like black hair, right? And so because of his life, but because of also where it's from, like it has taken on an important place in my work. And so I was doing these other kind of sculptures in the studio of taking Sargassum and rolling it into these kind of molding it into these kind of brick figures, brick shapes rather, and then wrapping it in black plastic. So now it's something which looks like maybe it's a key of cocaine or something again. Another direct drug reference, right? And then I put it between these two, praying hands. And so for me, like I automatically started to think about, what did that communicate? I think for many people it is probably a bit like, I guess, obtuse, right? But it can go between thinking about the place of drug traffic in Black economics, or it can kind of go in thinking about one's ancestral past, right? In relation to this material that could be used in different ways. So that's what this, that's where I'm kind of going with this piece.
Well, and Jamal, what's really interesting too, so you're using the word relic, these are praying hands. And if we go back to the Misconstrued Rap lyric piece with Martin Luther King, it's a work that's hung high on the wall, so it has this kind of reverential position for you as the viewer. And what role, I guess, does religion play in thinking through how you're dealing with objects specifically?
So this is a kind of theme in the work, and I think it's getting to be more important, or getting to be something that I understand better. And this scholar named Dr. Sherman Jackson has actually helped me to understand this, through lectures and kind of readings of his, to help to understand this much better. And this idea about Black religion, and Black religion as being a phenomenon like within America that is not necessarily tied to a particular religious tradition, but is using a faith to comment on or try to overcome white supremacy or anti-Black racism, right? And so I've been actually thinking about this concept in relation to a lot of the things that have been going on, and after the murder of George Floyd, right? And thinking about the importance of that in the future of this movement, right? Yeah. So.
And along those lines too, if you could talk, something, you're dealing with the iconography of Martin Luther King, but you've also dealt with the iconography of other civil rights activists that kind of go between different extremes. And I wanted to know if you could talk about this work a little bit in those terms, because I certainly think ideas of Black religion and sort of activism related to the end of white supremacy is certainly present in this extremely powerful work, which is also quite recent.
Yeah, so this is a piece which is called Lights from the Garden. And oh man, I wish I could think about that. I wish I could remember that term. But basically, like, this is I started collecting these chairs, which are these kind of bar chairs that I had seen in the photograph of Malcolm X's assassination at the Audubon Ballroom. These chairs are kind of strewn out on the stage floor, and it just, when I saw that, like, it seemed to me to represent something so monumental, like in a very kind of simple and elegant way, right? As well as a way that could kind of operate in secret, right? So I started to collect these chairs, and I eventually amassed enough to where I figured I can do something with them now, but I didn't know what that would be. Somewhere, during the process of having them, looking at them, and thinking about them, I wanted to create what is known as a minbar for the Audubon Ballroom, right, for the stage of the Audubon. And the minbar is a piece of, it's really a piece of religious furniture that is that is located within a mosque, right? And from from the minbar, the imam or spiritual leader would give um, uh, the sermon, right, or give a talk or what have you, right? So that's essentially what I've created. Um, it is very improvised in regards to how it's built. And it also simultaneously points to Malcolm's assassination by using these ballistic rods, which are used in detective work to list or to say where bullets came from, like during the shooting.
But I think what you do so beautifully is how you just deal with everyday materials and sort of put them into these dialogues where so many meanings can come from them in such a brilliant way. And I can't believe how fast this conversation is going, Jamal. But I wanted to, in terms of how you approach materials and the context of display and your interest in the sort of history of activist politics from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X, I wanted to know if we could talk about this project a little bit. So this is at the Menil Collection, and this is the project we did together in 2007 along with Franklin Sermons when he was here. And for this project, you, along with your colleagues in Otabinga Jones, essentially mined the museum, pulled out objects from our collection, and use them as teaching tools. And an important part about this installation and gallery was through the run of the show, we had classes, and those classes were based on the Black Panther Liberation School. So we had everyone from, Deborah Willis giving a class on how to read photography, to my favorite class of all was when Amiri Baraka came to talk about the Black arts movement. I don't know what that thing is on that photo, but there's Mr. Baraka who gave a really powerful lesson. And I'm wondering, because again, my frame of reference to sort of watching you evolve as an artist in these past 14 years is really started here. And I wanted to know if you could talk about this project a little bit, specifically in terms of how you approach materials in your work and objects.
Mm-hmm. So, this piece, we were approached by the Menil Collection after being in the Whitney Biennial, 2006. And one of the things that we were really trying to do as Otabinga Jones is to, educate, well, really to learn and educate about, as you mentioned earlier, like these historical gaps, right? All of us, myself, Jabari Anderson, Kenya Evans, and Robert Pruitt, all grew up in the South, right? All had a particular kind of Black upbringing, which often did not include many of the radical politics that we started to find out about in the late 90s, right? And so our work was really focused on trying to find out more about that, expose that, here, in many ways it's very Houston specific, right? So expose that to audiences here in Houston, and to just try to do that, try to be as independent with that as we could, right? That's the whole reason. We never really wanted to have a particular aesthetic with Otabinga Jones and Associates. We had created this gentleman named Otabinga Jones to kind of hide behind, right? And so these were all the things that we were doing as a collective. Now the Menil Collection, I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, the exhibition at the Menil Collection really gave me in depth, kind of a deep dive into the workings of a museum, what's in what is in a particular collection, and we just try to utilize those works with other things that we had pulled from our own studio or from our studio. We had a collective studio at the time, and presenting them all on the same level. So this may be a poster. So in this image here, you have a poster that Robert found in a locker at TSU, which was the first ever record I had heard of Carl Hampton. Right, it was
Right here.
yeah, right there, right next to a Warhol of Chairman Mao. Right.
Yeah. And here's a call. This is an Alexander Calder.
X-Clan record right below that. Right. So there was no high and low within our display, but we're trying to use everything in a way that could spark discussion and could could teach and that we could create something new from.
And it was certainly used. Like I remember those classes, and this material would be drawn into the courses. And here's an example of even sort of having these reading materials during the run of that show. So Jamal, I can't believe we're close to being out of time, but I thought we could end by talking about your work now, because as we're talking about Oda Benga Jones, which had a pedagogical mission, right? Like you were creating this classroom, and you've often talked about your work as a form of self-education. And I'm wondering where you're going and what you're thinking through now.
One of the things that I'm thinking through now in the work is I have these. Can you see my screen? Okay, so behind me right here. Oh, that's hard to do. Behind me right here is a portrait of Akhenaten Nefertiti. And it says, Budweiser, Great Kings of Africa. And this is a series which I'm very interested in. It has to deal with, the use of African history, right? That is for lack of, I'll use again, like deployed, right, onto a group of people. Of course, this is targeted and marketed at African Americans who have very little connection to their African past, right, and very not a rich, as collectively not a rich understanding of it, right. So what does that do to it? What does that do to this? To what you were saying about ideas of memory, and what does that do? How is history being used in that particular case? So this is something which I'm trying to find out about this series. It's not just one metal poster. It's a 28 poster series of a Pan-Africanist view of different African kings and queens. And so I'm wanting to deal with that, as well as other things which I think relate to images in popular culture that have been seen by many people, and that can have perhaps many different interpretations that can be tied to them, right? Not solely an academic reading or historical reading, but can maybe be much more layered,
It's what you do so well. And I think going back to the sculpture with Martin Luther King, that's exactly how it operates. So Jamal, you ready for some questions?
Sure.
I'm gonna start here by a question we have from Natalie from Houston, and she says, "I'm struck by how acutely pertinent your work seems today, with its longstanding investment in issues around social justice, natural history, memory." She wants to know if you could speak a bit how your artistic process is being shaped by current events.
So people in the past have often asked me, why do you not make work about current events, right? And I think this is kind of like a misunderstanding of how history works, or the use and function of history, particularly within Black culture, Black culture. Um, I, of course, I live in the present, right? I don't live in the past. I live in the present. So what I try to do is, I don't necessarily I don't strategize about my work too much. I follow my intuition, and I follow my interests in regards to the work, right? In relation to what I'm experiencing, right? And so I think that is something that I learned from Oda Jones as well, right? It just to try to follow your own sense of being, right, and follow your own kind of voice within something. And if that's true, I think that if you're doing it for the right reasons, or if you're not gonna say the right reasons, but like if you're genuinely doing that, I think you'll be led to something that can speak to more than one point, you know. And so I would say I'm really just, I've been, I don't want to say lucky, because it's unfortunate to be on a kind of like a historical loop, right? In regards to social issues, but that's just, how I've approached the content behind what I make.
But I mean, when we're talking about contemporary issues in history, I mean, it's everything from the sort of questioning around monuments to, when we were talking earlier, you brought up this idea of reading protest signs and the kind of loop of what you're reading on protest signs now versus, what the documentation of protests from the civil rights looked like.
And they're being very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we are on that kind of, we haven't been able to progress past that point yet, right?
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, there's a good question here from Arjun. So he asks, and this question might be too long to throw up in that text bubble, but bear with me. He says, the bust seems to outweigh the measuring capacity of the scale.
Right.
I think that Dr. King's methods were onerous for the next generation of Blacks. If so, did this result in the shift of the civil rights movement to a new perspective? Do you think this perspective is continuously shifting?
I do think that for one reason or the other, or for one reason and another, generations of activists have often, and I don't include myself to be an activist, but I'm just talking about in terms of like learning in a continuum, like they've had to teach themselves different, these lessons all over again. And me personally, and I think this is kind of going back to the issue of Black religion, is I think the nonviolent strategies of the civil rights movement will have to have another to be looked at again and reconsidered, right? Just because of the ways that some of these movements and some of these protests are being manipulated, right, in regards to violence, right? And so I think that idea about what it takes to be nonviolent and the kind of commitment and dedication to that that it takes to be nonviolent will definitely have to be reappraised right in this moment.
So let's take the final question, Jamal. This is from Katie Pondo. She said, you spoke about the influence of the Menil and Terry Atkins. Growing up in Houston, what influenced your early interest in art, and were there any local artists that impacted that interest in later work?
Okay. So skateboarding really started to spark my interest in art, or at least in visual culture. I also went to HSPVA. So being around some of the students there really, well, on some on some level, like by the time I got to high school, that was the only thing that I was really interested in, and it started with photography. One of the main local influences, photographically was ex-teacher of mine named Amy Blake-Moore. I went to Texas Southern University at first for undergrad, and so people there, like Harvey Johnson, Dr. Alvia Wardlaw, of course, the pedagogical approach of John Biggers, like all of these were very important. Rick Lowe and the situation that he created with Project Row Houses, that was also very important to my bringing, and in everyone in Oda Binga Jones really. Oda Binga Jones kind of comes out of that row house experience, as well as kind of my focus on the neighborhood of Third Ward, and my understanding of, I think, the part that it played in developing a very rich culture in Houston, and so yeah, like those are the things that local things that influence me.
I mean, let's since you brought up skateboarding,
Uh-huh.
I think an appropriate way to end this conversation is your new project that's in the current issue of Art Forum. If we can pull that slide up. This is a piece that's in this issue. It was so exciting to see where you are dealing with the iconography of skateboarding. And this is from an Instagram video, and it's been described as a Edward Muybridge-esque kind of breakdown of this skateboarding move over a police car. And I'd love for you to conclude by talking about this work and as essentially your most recent work.
As essentially my most recent work, yeah. Trying to think where to start with. I guess first of all, I guess I have to say, like, for me, growing up, like in the late '80s, or skating in the late '80s, early '90s, it wasn't something that was very popular amongst Black youth in the South, right? So regionally, the skating wasn't something that I saw a lot of Black youth doing, right? Of course, that would start to change with its popularity, and again, you go on the West Coast, and maybe it's a very different story. But growing up in the South, it was not. You didn't often see a lot of Black kids skating. So when I saw this video in which you have this Black skater who does this ollie onto the top of a LAPD patrol car, right? In which essentially he makes a skateboarding maneuver, what's called he makes a skateboarding maneuver like part of Black protest, right? And that's something that I was just shocked by, and I was it made me happy. Like, I was enjoyed by it, intrigued by it, and I really wanted to just slow that moment down, right? And so that's the whole Moy Bridgian aspect of it, of taking a video and then breaking it up into different and different steels. And then like it being interesting too, because it does help to extend the moment. It helps to extend the moment. And so what I did then was just name the trick, right? Which, if you know anything about skating, I don't think there are any tricks within skateboarding that relate to Black American kind of Black American politics or history. So name the trick is liberation rotation, and then in parentheses, ollie towards a metamorphosis, right? And so that's what's going on with this piece. And my explanation of it is that these, the naming of the trick and that kind of thing, these are the kind of small monuments that we erect to keep these kind of radical histories and desires alive. I will say one more thing. I know it's probably time to go, but my grandmother, um, my late grandmother, used to have this saying, "Well, I'll be John Brown." I don't know if you've ever heard the saying. You probably didn't hear it on the West Coast, but she would say, when she was like, I guess bemused about something or yeah, she would say, "Well, I'll be John Brown," and I knew that saying way before I knew who John Brown was, right? But that saying did keep the memory and the legacy of John Brown until I was able to find out, more about it. And so that's the kind of, I think that's one of the powers of popular culture, and one of the things I try to get at and highlight through the work.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Jamal. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me to this. I had a really good time talking with you.
I can't wait to see you in person.
I look forward to seeing you as well.
So thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and for everyone that made this possible, with special thanks to Ben Doyle, Lauren Pollock, and Anthony Martinez, who are behind the scenes making this look so seamless. Our next In Dialogue program will be on the work of Dan Flavin, and we welcome on July 29th, the Professor James Elkins and Donato Loya to engage in that conversation. You can always check our website. As always, Menil programs are free and open to everyone. So thank you again. Thank you, Jamal, and we will see you next time.